Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Sox On Tap.
Tony, my first reaction is just, fuck yes, let's go.
Sox versus the Twins. That's where it all starts. It all starts taking care of business in-house in the Central Division.
That's right, I'm a meatball.
You got to bring that top button swag, baby.
It is always great to beat the Cubs.
And I'm a homer, so I always say they're gonna.
Dallas Keuchel Lansing got some beards that you should be afraid of.
What everybody said when he gets out there, it's me versus the other guy, and I'm going to beat him. So I just love that mentality. It's cool and fucking tough.
Steve, would you say that Tony is mad online?
I would definitely say that.
The White Sox winner.
White Sox fans, welcome in to a post-mortem edition of the Sox On Tap post-game show. We got a three-way going on here, all live in person. Jonnie, joined by A-Kinz and Tony on Tap. Guys, it's over. It's over. Cue up the Yerman Mercedes Instagram post that it's actually officially over. White Sox eliminated last night with a win by the Mariners, and it feels bad, guys. It feels bad.
Doesn't feel good at all. I mean, it kind of feels like me after a round of 18 holes of golf. You feel like trash. Just worn down, tired, need another beer, and it's not a victory beer. It's definitely a misery beer, but that's kind of how it feels.
I think the weirdest thing about it is we're actually here with you after a White Sox win, first time in like over a week, but that's neither here nor there. Kins, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It was great hanging out with you guys today. Tony alluded to it. We played some golf today. It was fun getting out on the links with you guys today. We hit some balls out there that were hit further than some of the White Sox have all year. So I think we can take that as a positive. But yeah, no, the season's officially over as if it wasn't already. But, you know, it is what it is. And it's tough to think of it this way with all of the high hopes that we had coming into this year. But we're at the point now where if you heard Lucas Giolito post-game, he was just saying at this point, they just want to go 500. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, that's kind of a jumping off point here. And I think we talked about it, and it would have just been better if you said the kind of casual cliche sort of thing, right? We're just going to go out and every day we, expect to win, do the things, put in the work still, correct some of the things that went wrong. But no, we kind of rearranged some goalposts there. And I understand it. It's hard in that situation for any of those guys because they're frustrated talking to it. But just hearing that, oh, we want to go over 500, considering where the expectations were for the season, just makes it that much more bitter here down at the end, Tony.
It does. Obviously getting over 500 for the end of this season, yeah, you've got to take something out of it. I understand where Lucas Giolito comes out and says that. To me, you just say, we're going out there to win every single ball game. Don't put 500 into the mix here.
Yeah.
Just don't put 500 into the mix because this has been a 500 team all year. I expect them to finish 500.
81.
And if you don't, and you're anywhere underneath that, I mean, that's just going to be another joke. So I don't understand why they just didn't, curtail that a little bit more, but here we are.
You can go tinfoil hat time early. Are they trying to just go and make Rick Hahne's words from 2016 about the mired in mediocrity comments?
I mean, it could be at this point. I don't know what else to say on this. I mean,
if the goal is to go 5 or above 500, then that's still right around that
second
benchmark.
place. Yeah. Second place.
Yeah. Now you get into the Jerry territory, right? The finish second every year.
How does Jerry feel about third place, though? Because that is also a pretty realistic possibility.
I don't think Jerry feels great about third place. I don't think anybody feels great about third place.
Well, and the boys better come out and ready to play. We've said it a lot. All of these games the rest of the way are the most important game of the year. I guess the series with the Padres and then closing out with the Twins, in at least Jerry's mind, are some of the most important games of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a sad state to be in as White Sox fans, but obviously officially over now. Guys, I think we were talking about a little bit on the course, but As much as it obviously sucks, it's painful. We want to be playing postseason baseball in a couple of weeks and not going and hitting the links. We don't want the White Sox to be hitting the links like we were today. But we sat in the middle in kind of the limbo, right, for so long. I either want to be in it or out of it. So now at least they put me out of my misery.
Hey, some clarity.
Yeah.
Some clarity amongst the White Sox fans is at this point the most clarity that we have around this team. There's only one thing that you know as a White Sox fan right now, and that is they're not making the fucking playoffs this year. That's it. Everything else is up for grabs. Who's your manager? No fucking clue. Who's going to be your GM next year? I don't know, because it might be Rick Hahn. You have no idea. Who's going to be playing first base for your White Sox next year? No idea. Everything else is up in the air. We know one thing. They're not making the fucking playoffs.
Yeah.
That's the only clarity that they've provided us up until this point.
And I like your point, Jonnie, what you said. It's nice to just kind of be away from this in between period. Now, at the very least, there will be a few headlines here and there that will come up, but at the very least, until maybe around Thanksgiving and into the middle of the winter, there's not going to be much to pay attention to. We can move on with our lives until the hot stove starts to hit. And then at that point, hopefully the hot stove does get hot. And there are some moves that will make us be excited for next year, because right now with how things look, moves need to be made. And there are significant changes that need to happen if the White Sox want to take the Central back.
Yeah, so on Sunday Funday, I think Steve and Tony and I, we discussed this a little bit, and we talked a lot about manager, but you talked about hot stove there, Andrew, and I just want to go and dive in and a little bit on that. When we're looking ahead to next year, changes that this team has to make. Obviously, there's a culture sort of, we had talked about a clubhouse cancer, potentially of sorts, a mentality shift that needs to happen going into 2023. But let's talk some personnel. Who's going to be here? Who's not? Who could they possibly add in the offseason to help right the ship here? I'll go ahead and turn it over to you guys, because it's kind of on everyone's mind right now, thinking, how can we improve for 2023? And I got to say, it's a fucking hard job. So whoever's manning that, whether it be Rick Hahn or whoever, there's no clear-cut answers, and you probably won't find out until the end of the 2023 season if they worked out or not. So hard job, but let's do our best to try and predict some shit here. Go ahead.
Hey, I mean, if you want to improve, Aaron Judge is a free agent, right? So if you want to improve,
wait, he's right-handed though. You can't have that. You need a lefty.
There's options out there. However, I think that those ships have sailed. But if you're going to give me the floor here and say, how would you fix this? Well, Aaron Judge would look mighty nice in right field, hitting a bunch of bombs for the Chicago White Sox. We know how I feel about fireworks. I fucking love them. Aaron Judge obviously doing that whole firework hitting thing, ball go far, team go far, as Steve says. That's not happening. Get it out of your mind. It's so far-fetched. You go look at what they can actually do. And we were talking about a little of this on the golf course today. Elvis Andrus, looked good when he came here. I think he was in an 0 for 20-something stretch. He said that he wants to come back. He'll switch positions. Obviously, second base is in need. I think catcher is in need as well. I don't know if I'm comfortable riding Sebi Zavala in as my starting catcher next year. Who knows what you're going to get out of Yasmani Grandal. Obviously, you would have liked the White Sox to have done something up until this point with his contract. That hasn't worked out.
Who wants it? Nobody wants it.
Nobody wants it, so he's going to be here. But obviously, you're going to have some need behind the plate next year, so I think they need to address the catcher position. I'm less inclined to say they need a right fielder right now. You've got a good full season out of Gavin Sheets. You've got Oscar Colas pressing, so I don't think that that's really a need. The back end of your bullpen, which seemingly they've thrown tons and tons of money at, hasn't really panned out there. So I would see where they would want to address that. But the biggest need, in my opinion, going into next year is starting pitching.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more with the starting pitching point, Tony. And I also couldn't agree more with the point that the Aaron Judge dream and the fantasy is very far-fetched. If the Sox had a seat at the table when it came to Bryce Harper and Manny Machado, when it comes to Aaron Judge, they don't even have a seat at the table. They can't even find a parking spot to get into the meeting where there is that seat at the table.
Right.
So that's not happening.
I mean,
But,
we're all sitting around a table right now.
yeah, it's a small table. I'm not sure the Sox can squeeze in there. But yeah, when it comes to starting pitching, they really do need to make some work there. You would really hope to see another big jump from Dylan Cease next year, and then you'll have Lance Lynn back. Hopefully he can be healthy next year right off the bat and really contribute and be somewhat of that anchor that he was back in 2021. And from what we've seen flashes of once he really started to get right here in the 2022 season. And then beyond that, there's a lot of question marks. You would hope that Michael Kopech could have a jump similar to that of Dylan Cease from his 2019, 2020, and 2021 seasons into this year. You would hope that he would have a gradual progression, but from there, you just don't really know. And then after that, when it comes to guys like Lucas Giolito and Jonnie Cueto, you would like to think that Lucas Giolito is still that guy from 2020 and 2021.
Starting to get farther away from that number.
I know.
Yeah.
He's just not pumping that 97, 98 that he once was, and he really doesn't have a third pitch. So he becomes a great trade candidate this offseason where you are selling low on him, but I think there is still value there on the open market for a team that could really use a fourth or fifth starting pitcher and would be willing to take on a reclamation project like him.
That's where we're at with Lucas Giolito, folks.
Honestly,
Wow.
I mean,
yeah,
I think he does have a lot of good stuff, when he's on, but it's going to take a fresh mind when it comes to him. So that's all I'll say there. Could definitely use another arm out there, because another guy that people would like to toss out there is Garrett Crochet. I think he's not going to be built up to the point where he can handle a full starter's load.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get Michael Kopech.
Yes, from 2021 with him, absolutely.
Well, not even 21. I think they're going to try and push him to go and get in that starting rotation next year, but you might only get 160 innings out of him.
Maximum.
That's generous. Yeah.
Maybe 120.
Yeah,
if you're really going to push it, at 160 sounds unrealistic to me now that I think about it. 110.
Me personally, with him, I think a great spot for him would be the Michael Kopech hybrid role of last year, where he would get some spot starts here and there. Other than that, be used in somewhat of a mix between some long relief appearances and, when needed, be put in a high leverage spot. Because
as long as he's throwing 103, I'm fine.
We'll see.
Yeah. Guys, you guys brought up a lot of needs there, but I think one kind of big area that's a question mark. We heard it yesterday. Luis Robert believes the White Sox should 100% bring back Jose Abreu. No shock there, country mate. Obviously, those guys, those Cubans, they love him. He's obviously been a leader in here ever since he showed up on the South Side, really. But on an expiring contract, going to turn 36 in January, and I understand he has been one of your best players. So it on one level, it seems like a no-brainer to bring him back. When you go and sift through the layers, right, it's okay. Well, we played guys out of position all the time, all year. Andrew Vaughn was drafted as, at least in my mind, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you believe he was going to be the successor to Jose Abreu at some point?
Sort of, yeah.
This is, in my mind, just thinking about this, and it might be, some people might love this, some people might hate it. I think it's a natural breaking point right here into the transition there. So while, yes, you are losing the leader and there's a lot to be replaced there, I know there's multi-layers to this in terms of contractual issues and positioning issues. This would be the natural point to transition Andrew Vaughn into full-time first base. So do the White Sox bring back Jose Abreu, and then, what do you do to kind of replace some of that leadership, some of that sort of, and that's if he goes. It's kind of a lot of open-ended stuff here, because then you could go into the DH role. Then, we'll just bring Abreu back and let him DH more if Vaughn wants to play first. Well, you got Eloy there, who can't really play the outfield all the time. You got Yaz, who can't, the knees are shot. Is all shit. We already know that. You've got Gavin Sheets. I know he had some respectable, outfield numbers at some points, but at the same time, you also kind of view him, his body type as a first base DH, right? It's very log jammed. And then if you go and bring back Jose Abreu, it kind of creates some of the same issues and it becomes cyclical in that regard to me. So early on in this thing, when I'm just thinking about it, how to move these pieces around, like I said, it's not easy to do any of this. I would probably move on from him. I know it's not probably too popular, but that's just my take on it. What do you guys think?
I think so too. And I think more so what it comes down to is if you're the White Sox front office, you can keep 2 of the 3 between Abreu, Eloy, and Vaughn. Now, who those 2 are will really kind of be up to Rick Hahn and Jerry Reinsdorf, all of those guys. I think I would be surprised if I did not see him back. Jerry Reinsdorf's a very loyal guy, as we know. Sometimes loyal to a fault. Actually, more often than not, loyal to a fault. So I would be surprised if I didn't see Jose Abreu back, although I think for the trajectory of this team moving forward for years to come, I think the 2 that I would keep would be Eloy and Vaughn. But I think that, as we alluded to earlier, this front office is going to be very, very, very busy this offseason. We're going to see moves made that we didn't expect. And I think at the very least, if there's a inclination that they want to keep Andrew, or if they want to keep Jose Abreu around, I think that Jerry will have Rick Hahn on the phone very frequently and essentially see what these offers are on the open market for a guy like Vaughn or Eloy.
I think that Jose Abreu is coming back. I think that that's almost a sealed deal. Now, where I'm at with this is if and when they do bring him back, here's what I hope happens. There is an open, honest conversation with Jose Abreu about his playing time at first base and being in the lineup every single day, because you want to see growth from Andrew Vaughn. If you're not going to move on from Andrew Vaughn, and that's an organizational cornerstone that you think that Andrew Vaughn is, you need to give him that experience to be that successor. I don't know if Jose Abreu is going to play that way. He's a guy that likes to be in the lineup every single day. It was almost a shock to see him off. Just what was that, in the first game of this series, or the last game of last series on Sunday?
Yeah, against Sundays.
Yeah, he was off. That's big news when Jose Abreu has a day off. But if he's coming back, I think this goes back to, you've got a managerial change that's most likely going to happen here. Obviously, Tony La Russa doesn't finish the season with the team. You're going to have a new manager in here in spring is what it seems like is going to happen. We talk about setting the tone. I hate to be cliche, but you have to set the tone with Jose Abreu. If you're coming back, it's year to year, and you're not at first base every day, because you have to give Andrew Vaughn or Gavin Sheets, whoever's on this roster, the opportunity to play a little bit more frequently in the earlier part of the season. Now, Abreu is also a bat that when you take him out of this lineup, it's going to have some ramifications there. I don't think that Andrew Vaughn's bat has advanced enough. I think that Eloy Jimenez is still going to have injury struggles, whether or not he's playing left field or just a full-time DH. You're going to have one of those 2 guys is either going to go through streaky spots, slumps, injuries, all of that other shit. And you're going to want a guy like Jose Abreu around. If he's not here on this team, where are you going? I mean, obviously you can give some at-bats to Gavin Sheets, but let's go look at the depth that this organization has at first base. Yeah, it's kind of loaded up front. Are you giving those at-bats to Jake Berger? How are you trying to maneuver around this? I would rather see them bring back Abreu and have a problem of, I've got too many major league ready guys to play on this quote unquote, as Rick Hahn would say, World Series caliber team. I'd rather have that problem than, all right, it's clear cut and dry that Andrew Vaughn's going to be my first baseman, and see him struggle next year or get injured or have any other issue, and then see Jose Abreu off, somewhere else. I would rather keep the pieces that we know here that work. Figure out how to make it work on the ball field is a totally different thing. yeah, we're loaded in certain positions. We haven't dealt from strength, so to speak, on the open trade market. But to see Jose Abreu just walk totally eliminates your ability to move a guy like Andrew Vaughn or a guy like Eloy Jimenez at the trade deadline next year if you need to, or even next offseason. Lock them up for a year or two, figure it out, because I don't think that your answers are as clear cut and dry as everybody wants to make them out to be right now.
I think that if you're going to do that, and I think they probably will, then one of those two. I'll go and subscribe to A-Kinz's theory. Move one of them then. Move either Eloy or Andrew Vaughn and actually address positions of need. That would be my I just don't see them doing that because
letting them walk for nothing.
Right.
I don't think.
There's that aspect to it too. Like I said, I kind of went with like the breaking point, or excuse me, the transition point theory with my approach there. But if you're going to keep Jose Abreu, which once again, I agree with you, that I would kind of be shocked if he wasn't back. I would like to see one of those other guys move to address needs out there. And I know you guys talked about brought up outfield and other needs there. I know starting pitching obviously is one of those. But when I go and look at that, I would like a goddamn everyday actual outfielder there. I'm sorry, I cannot see Andrew Vaughn out there anymore. Even Gavin Sheets, for as much as he was able to contribute there, the bat is not doing enough to absolutely justify having that. You got to have at least one other decent to plus defender out there alongside Luis Robert. And that's another thing. That guy's got to stay healthy too. So that when you're talking about trading some of those guys, that's where you could bring in possibly a return there. Second base, obviously, if you don't go the Andrews route there, you got to fulfill some of those needs. And guys, one thing that we haven't really even touched on is the White Sox were atrocious defensively this year. Fundamentally from an aspect there, and then also just like I said, guys playing out of position, so you're giving up certain extra bases, you're giving up runs via incompetent outfielders. You got rule changes coming next year that's going to make defense all the more important, and they would be idiotic to go in and try and jam square pegs into round holes in the outfield again next year.
I don't disagree with you there. And we've talked a little bit about some of the rule changes on this show. The game's going to get a little bit faster. It's going to be a little bit more important to cut down runs. I'm also over Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets in left and right. And the only reason I say this right now is because something that you said, Johnny, the bats haven't made up for it yet.
Right.
If
one
both
thing.
of those guys had 30 home runs this season, I don't think we'd even give a shit about how they're playing on defense. We didn't even come close.
Right.
Kins, I don't know if you've got anything on that.
No, I think we pretty much nailed that right there.
Yeah, it is just tough to go and see them struggle like that. And it goes just beyond the inability to field those positions. Obviously, you want to have that baseline there, but whoever comes in as manager, that's the next topic that we're going to get to, guys. But whoever comes in as manager absolutely has to instill the fundamentals. I think everybody's seen the Jay Kuda supercut, right? Of the White Sox drop the ball this year, quite literally. Have you seen that, Tony? I think everybody knows that. Mm-hmm. They cannot hit cutoff men. When they do, those guys drop the ball a lot. They can't get it into the catcher. And when they do, those guys miss the ball a lot too. There needs to be a fundamental installation there. And it seems very kind of elementary on that level, kind of high school baseball. Will you? But they're going to need a guy that goes and makes that a priority. And as monotonous as that may be for those guys when they go and convene down in Glendale, when they ramp up spring training next March or next February, actually, who's going to be leading the charge there? Because I don't think TLR is coming back. I don't think Miguel Cairo's the guy. Let's talk about next manager of the White Sox.
Plenty of options on the table right now. I said this when we were golfing, guys. My pick for this is Willie Harris. He's a guy that interviewed for this team in a managerial position. I was talking with our guy Besnick about it the other day. A lot of people will go and, just ride that narrative that the White Sox didn't do a managerial search before they brought in Tony La Russa. Fair. They didn't actually interview A.J. Hinch, the guy that everybody wanted them to interview, but I do know that Harris had an interview. I think that he's your next successor. to this White Sox managerial position. He's a guy that's managed in this organization in the minor leagues, done some really good things. I think he's got to be on the short list. Scored the winning run in 2005. He's got those White Sox ties that that this organization likes. He's a good baseball mind, good baseball player when he played the game. I could see him taking the reins here. Obviously, you've heard AJ Przinsky's name mentioned as well. I know a lot of people hear these names and say, why the hell do we have to go down this road every single time? And some of that is it's easier to do business with people Some of it's a little bit of Jerry Reinsdorf, business practices in there as well too. But overall, I think, guys, at this point, whoever comes in to manage is going to have one of the toughest tasks out of any White Sox manager in recent history. Obviously, Rick Renteria, through the rebuild, there were expectations. Tony La Russa, been there, done that. Obviously runs into health problems at the end, made some questionable decisions that people had, taken him to task for. But whoever comes in here has a team that a GM has stated is ready to go, and they need to get the job done. Whoever it is, doesn't matter. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, it absolutely will be tough. And I think you made some great points there about Willie Harris. If you look back at some of the track history in terms of White Sox managerial hires, a lot of them lately have had ties with this team in the past. So if you look at a guy like Willie Harris, that's kind of like a Robin Ventura on steroids here. That's actually a pretty good hire. It's someone who's had ties to this team, knows how Jerry operates things, knows how he likes things to be run, and as you said, has that experience being able to win these big games. And oftentimes, as weird as this sounds, sometimes the best coaches are guys that aren't always playing because they see
spent
things
a lot
from the
of time
dugout.
on the bench.
Exactly. They have a much different perspective on things, kind of like I was in high school. You can really get some good viewpoints on things, and I think that Willie would have that. And when it comes to, comparing him to the Robin Ventura, hiring, like I said, he's at least had an upward trajectory in terms of the experience and the responsibility that he's had. So had a pretty steady trajectory in the minors through the White Sox, spent some time with the Giants and the Reds as well. And now spending some time with the Cubs major league team as their third base coach. I think that's a good hire. Could really work out well. And you're even seeing NBC Sports starting to write about it a little bit. The post-game show today, Chuck Garfien and Ozzie were talking about it. So it seems like when stuff like that happens, more or less, when the media starts to get involved and starts to kind of pop these things out, seems like that could eventually be happening, could almost be like a feeler. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I think if you're looking for I think that compared to some of these home run type hires, you'd really be looking for in, say, a Bruce Bochy or a Ron Washington, you're probably not going to be able to make that happen. I don't think Ron Washington would want to leave his role in Atlanta for a team like the White Sox, how they're built. And Bruce Bochy's probably enjoying his retirement with the very solid finish he had there with the Giants. I don't think you're going to drag him out of retirement like you did, like the White Sox were able to do with Tony. I think if this team was on a similar trajectory to how they were back in 2020 when the Tony La Russa hire was made, maybe then you could coerce a guy like a Bruce Bochy to come and see if he can make his legacy stand there. But I think something like that would be more or less a pipe dream, and a guy like Willie Harris or some other bench coach elsewhere would be a more realistic viewpoint.
Do you guys think if Willie Harris is hired, there are going to be segments of fans who question the hire because A, number one, he was related to the White Sox, and B, number two, has never managed a major league team before?
Absolutely. But that's something that he's going to have to prove wrong.
There will always be a segment that will question it if he wasn't whacking off the stats with the Tampa Bay Rays. So
yeah, that and White Sox fans were mad at the fact that Tony La Russa managed too many games. Now you get a guy that hasn't managed any games. I mean, yeah, a nice happy medium would be good, but with how things are with the White Sox, you're not going to get the dream candidate probably. So I think a guy like Willie Harris is as good as you're going to get, and you're going to live with the fact that he doesn't have any MLB managing experience, but with that, he's been around the game long enough. I would trust him.
yeah, you guys summed up a lot of that on Willie Harris there. I will say Boob Nightingale has written about Willie Harris. He did a report that he did interview during that process before TLR was hired, and then he was mentioned in another Boob Nightingale piece at USA Today. So go ahead and be on the lookout for Boob Nightingale's work, and he's usually got the fingers on the pulse of both Jerry and Kenny. So that'll probably give you a good indication of where the White Sox are leaning. If you remember, he was one of the first to kind of float the TLR stuff, and people couldn't believe it at first. But of course, obviously,
it also kind of makes sense now when he's the one who had the TLR stuff that, he's coming out with some Willie Harris stuff,
right.
and then you go
like
add,
said,
start to add the pieces to the puzzle. Put them all together
right.
here. There was just a report, I believe, from him as well that the White Sox front office, before Tony was shut down, the White Sox front office was split on who is supposed to be managing this team next year, or even down the stretch. Certain segments like Miguel Cairo, somewhat La Russa back. Others want to go outside. Add in Willie Harris. Makes sense.
No.
At least to me.
Let's be real. The only part of the front office that wants Tony La Russa back is probably Jerry.
Well,
right.
That's right.
Well, I will say just this: learn from you. I mean, not that this should have even happened on this front, but come on, let's not even fuck around with the Bruce Bochy stuff. Come on, learn your lesson from what happened with TLR, especially at the end there. I've heard reports that I don't even know if Bochy's even in that great of health anymore. So I want to squash that one.
Judge, Sox fans.
Nib it in the bud right now. I would probably, we're betting man, place that money on Willie Harris as things currently stand, but we shall see as the offseason progresses. Guys, we talked about it a little bit in terms of that sort of log jam when it came to positional players around a break. Let's go and move on the pitching side, because the multi-million dollar super pen never got the job done this year. Do the White Sox go and move anything out of that when you see emergences of guys like Reynaldo Lopez who are already there? Do you move a big contract that's already on the books that they spent so much money on over these past couple of off seasons to go and acquire some of these? I mean, look at some of those names: Liam Hendricks, Kendall Graveman. Not bad pitchers by any means. However, would they be guys potentially on the move, or anybody else for that matter on that front?
Yeah, it's really hard, Johnny, because I like Liam Hendricks a lot. I really like his fire. I like his passion. And overall, for the most part, he's been a solid anchor in the back end of this White Sox bullpen. There's been times here and there this year and last year where he's gone on these stretches where he's given up some runs and he's blown some saves. And more or less, he'll often correct it about a week or so later. But he's been a solid guy back there. And when it comes to playoff baseball and when it comes to high leverage situations,
You got to get to the playoffs first.
True. But when you're there or in just any other high leverage spot in general, it's nice to have someone back there. At this point, he's not quite the tier of a guy like Emmanuel Clase within your own division and stuff, but he's still a good option back there. Now, the question is, with him only having 1 year left on his deal and how relievers, as you mentioned, can be pretty cyclical. I don't think it's a bad idea to at least hear out some offers on what value you can get from Liam Hendricks on an open market.
He might be one of your best trade chips, right?
I think he is. And especially for a team that's really gunning for 1 year of a big competitive push, and not 1 year with him is not that much commitment. Whereas if there were 3 or 4 years on his deal, right? So I think a team like the Dodgers, who have had their fair share of bullpen struggles so far, the Craig Kimbrell experience hasn't really worked out for them, similar to how it didn't work out with the White Sox last year.
Essentially doing the same shit.
And they were trade partners in the past, even though the Sox didn't really quite get what they wanted out of that trade either, with an underperforming A.J. Pollock this season. I wouldn't be shocked if the Sox and the Dodgers were on the phone a little bit this offseason and we're trying to make something else work for that. Whether he gets moved or not is the big question, but I think a team like that, or even a team like the Braves, or just some of these other contenders that are very set pretty much across the board with the rest of their rosters, but are just really lacking that back end anchor, like a guy like Liam.
We're just looking for something to push them over the top, right?
I think it's a very good possibility, and then that could mean that the Sox have some trust in a guy like Reynaldo Lopez to be able to close out games next year.
See, I would love that. However, my biggest concerns around this are, number one, Liam Hendriks' arm. I don't know if that guy passes a physical in order to be traded at this juncture, because you did have that
where he said he was pitching with a torn or
UCL.
whatever.
Yeah, he's had that
2008 or whatever.
Right. And so I'm worried there. And there was a report that came out of, I believe it was NBC, I could be wrong, where Liam had stated that he'd like to get back to a multi-inning relief role where he's one of the more dominant guys, can handle multiple innings. You already saw all sorts of usage issues with him this year. I don't know if he commands as much as what you would get for a top-tier closer on the open market in trade value. I'd also like to flip it back, guys. You talk about a team that's looking for somebody to come into the back end of a game, close it down, do all that other stuff. The Sox are still supposed to be that team. The White Sox next year are supposed to be a team that's going to be competing for a division until stated otherwise. Until Rick Hahn comes out, or whoever the GM of this team is, and says, all right, we're not competing for the division this year. We're retooling, we're rebuilding, whatever our word you want to use. Until that happens, removing the one solid piece of the back end of your bullpen that you've had, I think can end up backfiring miserably on the White Sox. I would say, from a value standpoint, a guy that, has a tremendous upside to him, ready to step into another role, maybe a Reynaldo Lopez, who still has some of that prospect history, might fetch you something on the open market. I don't think either of those guys are going to come give you an answer in any of the big giant holes that you have. One due to health, the other due to not having the pedigree to get it done. I worry that you'd have to package either one of those guys up to get anything relevant. And again, it just depends on where this team wants to go next year. I don't think that they're going to try and rip things down. If we were talking about a full-scale rebuild, I think Liam's one of the first guys out. I don't think we're there yet right now.
No.
So I think
they should not be.
I think you're going to end up running it back with Liam as your
right.
closer.
And I just wanted to make this clear. And we're not saying that the White Sox should fucking clean house and get rid of everyone. You physically cannot, because there'd be too many people leaving in terms of, we were talking about players that are ready to contribute now and where you're at in the standing of that. And then B, you still need to feel the team on the field regardless. So there's issues there. But and then also you would have to imagine you got underperformance across the board, essentially.
Yep.
When you're talking about these guys. I don't really know who overperformed expectations outside of Reynaldo Lopez, outside of Dylan Cease, maybe. Right. But I'm talking about mainstays, position players, everyday guys. So when I just think about that, I think about you trading contracts. And with Liam only having 1 year, that's why I brought that up. And that was something that we also shot the shit about a little on the golf course. So wanted to bring that in front of the camera here for all of our listeners. So guys, it's going to be an interesting offseason to say the least. Like I said, I do not envy Rick Hahn or whoever will be in that GM chair one fucking bit, because once again, you absolutely can't tear it down, but you also got to fix things on the same token. It's a very tough spot to be in. And I think one last thing that we're going to address here is the culture. And obviously we've said this a million times on the Sox on Tap show, Tony. to be a fly on the wall in the White Sox clubhouse. I want that honest evaluation from both coaching staff, from the players, giving it to the front office, and then sending that up, even if the front office ain't going to be there, sending it up the rail to whatever it is, and identifying the core issues of what it was, because something wasn't right. When a team, they go on that little run, so everyone thought it was just TLR, right? Well, that proved to not be the case when they rolled over and fucking died after losing just the one game against the Guardian. Shit, I know they still couldn't have taken the season series, and it would have been more of an uphill climb, but they still could have kept fighting, right? And say they won 2 out of 3, they won the last 2 of that, then you're still in that mix right there. You're still in that conversation. So it wasn't just TLR. I'm sure he was part of the problem. It wasn't just him. I don't think Miguel Cairo's the guy next year. There is something wrong within that clubhouse, and I don't really know what it is. And I think that's what's most agitating to White Sox fans right now. How the fuck do you even fix that?
It's very confusing. I think, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years down the road, we'll see a nice ESPN 30 for 30 about what could have been with the 2022 White Sox, because I don't know. These things don't really make their way to the media, even within a year or 2 of them happening. But I'll be intrigued in like 2030, we'll say, especially when some of these players are done playing, they're on their own podcasts, or
you'll hear these stories in Lot B.
Yeah, you'll start to hear things be able to trickle their way through. And as unexcited as I am to hear how painful and annoying some of them are, at the same time,
you want answers, right?
I'm curious.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
Yeah,
I definitely had a tweet somewhere in June. You pull up a bar stool next to Lance Lynn in some Indiana bar in 2030, and you say, what the fuck happened with this 2022 Chicago White Sox? And Lance Lynn tells you a story. That's exactly what it's going to be like. It's just been such a year of false promises are one thing. Continuous underachievement is another. And, Lynn said it best the other day. It's when you're playing all year and you suck.
You're playing like shit all year.
When you're playing like shit all year, what else are you going to do? I don't know if a manager change would have solved this earlier. Obviously, it tailed off in the most important of times. So that kind of rests that notion as to, it was just the manager. If you want to go to, the offense, there's been plenty of times where the offense has carried the pitching. If you want to go lay it on the pitching, there's been plenty of times where the pitching's had great ball games and the offense doesn't show up. It just seems like the team never really got in unison with each other.
Right.
I don't know if that's a clubhouse thing.
Division.
I don't know if it's division in the clubhouse. I don't know if it's lack of try. I don't know if it's everybody just simultaneously had bad stretches at the same time. It didn't work this year at all. And I think that's what leaves us, as you said, wanting answers, because when you have answers to what went wrong, you can fix it. Right now, there doesn't seem to be any answers that are glaring.
My plea is that I hope they just find them internally. And like I said, they're probably not going to be made public for years to come. But I want those resolved, and I will just go out and throw out a theory, some tinfoil hat time. There are cliques within that clubhouse, certain groups of people that don't get along with each other. This is just theory. This is based on nothing. I'm not a fly on the wall. As much as I wish I could be, I am not. There are cliques within there. So Willie Harris, when he comes in next year, because that's my prediction, also no basis in that, just my prediction, he is going to not only have to play baseball manager, he is going to have to play high school counselor and get these fucking teenage girls to get together and take the movie Mean Girls, and they're going to have the big conference in the fucking gym, and they're all going to have to fucking air it all out, and they're going to have to get it right before the 2023 season starts. That's what I got.
Spring training is going to be more of a retreat, like you said, than it will be an actual
spring
preseason.
Retreat.
Yeah,
that's
spring retreat instead of spring training.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you said, I mean, it's hard to tell when you're watching these games from your couch or from the stands, but the only thing I can really think of is there's a real clear divide between the guys that are out there that really, really want it and that really don't and could care less. And I wouldn't be surprised if it came down to the guys like, I don't know, for instance, a guy like Jose Abreu or a Lance Lynn who really want to be there, really want to win these games, speaking up to the guys that don't want to be there and are just kind of taking it.
Going through the motions.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're just going through the motions, kind of taking this opportunity for granted and are just content with being the 2021 AL Central champions.
Yep. So, all right, guys, it's been tough, but it is over. Both the White Sox playoff hopes and this show, this episode of Sox on Tap. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Make sure to go and subscribe on Tap Sportsnet on YouTube, like us on Facebook. Go drop your comments in here so we can feature them during future shows. We'll be here with you for a couple more during this season, and then obviously all off season. We'll have plenty to discuss as the news starts to roll in. So keep it locked in here at Sox on Tap and at On Tap Sportsnet on Twitter. Go and check out ontapsportsnet.com for all written content there. Be firing off some takes there. And until next time, boys, White Sox forever.
White Sox forever.
White Sox forever. Happy 29th and golden birthday to our boy.
Yeah,
Jonnie
happy
Nine.
birthday to this guy right here.
Thank you,
Jonnie,
gentlemen.
just one quick thing before we end officially. This being your 29th year of existence, just any sort of wisdom or advice that you can give some of our listeners here as
This is perfect.
I'm sure this year has felt like more than 1 year
Right.
of your life.
Yeah.
Just any sort of advice or just things you've learned along the way that you plan to take with you here in year number 29.
Never get up for the letdown. Know that from my sports fandom. And as the great Jimmy Conway, Goodfellas, once said, never rat on your friends and always keep your mouth shut. Until next time.
White Sox